The celebration lights sparkled across Earth's night sky, brilliant streams of color marking 23 years since humanity joined the Galactic Council. In every major city, people danced and sang, grateful for the peace that had come with membership in the great family of stars. Children waved flags showing Earth's blue marble alongside the symbols of 100 alien worlds. It was supposed to be a night of joy. Admiral Tae-Yong Kim watched the celebrations from his office aboard the Soul's Pride, humanity's flagship vessel. The massive warship orbited Earth in silence, its weapon systems powered down as regulations required. Through the viewport, he could see the smaller human ships scattered across the orbital lanes, each one carrying monitoring equipment installed by Council inspectors. Every human vessel had them. Every single one. His communication panel beeped. The face of Dr. Hyjin Park appeared, calling from the Council chambers thousands of light years away. She looked tired, her diplomatic robes crisp but her eyes showing the strain of endless meetings. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I'm about to present our petition. Wish me luck." Taeyang nodded, though his chest felt tight. 23 years of perfect cooperation. They have to recognize that. Hyjin tried to smile. "I hope you're right." The transmission shifted to show the vast council chamber, a sphere of polished metal where representatives from 300 species gathered. At the center floated the High Council's platform, where the 5 eldest species sat in judgment. The Vrexians looked like armored bears, their fur dark and eyes cold. The luminals were beings of light contained in crystalline shells, calculating and distant. The others were equally ancient, equally powerful. Hyjin walked to the speaking platform, her small human form dwarfed by the chamber's size. She began her presentation with a steady voice. She showed holographic displays of human achievements, peacekeeping missions where human soldiers had died protecting alien civilians, technological innovations that humanity had shared freely with the Council, new trade routes that human explorers had mapped through dangerous space. She spoke of cultural exchanges, of human artists and scientists working alongside aliens, of the deep desire humanity held to be true partners in the galactic community. "We have proven ourselves," Hyjin said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "We ask that the preservation protocols be lifted. We ask for full membership, for the right to defend ourselves without restriction, for the freedom to grow as other species have grown." The chamber fell silent. Taeyang watched from his distant ship, holding his breath. Around him, his bridge crew had stopped their work to watch the broadcast. The Vrexian High Counselor rose, his massive form dominating the platform. When he spoke, his voice was deep and final. "Petition denied." Hyjin's face showed shock. "But the evidence clearly shows, that humanity remains too volatile for full membership," the Vrexian continued. "Your species has existed in space for less than 3 centuries. You have known peace for only 23 years. Your history is written in blood and conflict. We cannot trust such a species with unrestricted power." A luminal counselor's crystalline voice added, "Furthermore, new restrictions are deemed necessary for galactic security." The words that followed struck like hammer blows. All human vessels would be limited to sublight speeds in Council space. Earth's defensive moon bases would be dismantled within 6 months. Every human military officer would undergo psychological evaluation by Council specialists to assess their emotional stability. Hyjin's voice cracked. "You're treating us like children." "Like prisoners." "We are treating you as your nature demands," the Vrexian said. "This decision is final. Humanity will accept these terms or face expulsion from the Council." The transmission ended. The screen went dark. Taeyang sat in his chair, his hands gripped tight on the armrests. Around him, his crew stood in stunned silence. Lieutenant Dongwu Li, his strategic officer, spoke first. "Sir, they can't do this." "We followed every rule, every regulation." "They just did," Taeyang said quietly. Captain Unichoi, the youngest member of his senior staff, looked at the darkened screen. "What do we do?" Before Taeyang could answer, emergency channels lit up across his console. The reaction from Earth was immediate and fierce. Protests erupted in every major city. The celebrations turned to riots within minutes. Colonial governors were demanding answers, crying out for Earth to reject the Council's terms, but Taiyang already knew what would happen. Earth's government would accept. They had no choice. The Council's combined military power could crush humanity's defenses in days. The preservation protocols that kept humanity weak also kept them alive. The official response came within hours. President Dae Young-shin appeared on every screen across human space, his face grave. "We must accept the Council's decision," he said. "I know this is painful. I know this feels like betrayal. But we cannot fight the entire galaxy. We will comply with the new restrictions. We will prove, once again, that humanity can be trusted." Tae-yang listened to the speech and felt something cold settle in his chest. Prove themselves again. Always proving, always begging, always accepting less than they deserved. Because they were young and small and weak, he opened a secure channel to his senior officers. "Begin preparations for decommissioning the moon bases. Follow every order precisely. Make no protests." Dongwu stared at him. "Sir, we follow orders," Taeyang said. For now? Over the following weeks, Taeyang watched as human defenses were systematically dismantled. The moon bases that had protected Earth for 2 generations were powered down, their weapons removed, their crews reassigned. Council inspectors arrived to oversee every step, their presence a constant reminder of humanity's subordinate status. The psychological evaluations were worse. Human officers were questioned for hours about their feelings, their thoughts, their dreams. Perfectly capable soldiers were marked as potentially unstable and removed from service. The Council's message was clear. Humans could not be trusted to know their own minds. Yuna came to Taeyang's office one evening, her evaluation report in hand. "They failed me," she said quietly. "Too emotionally invested in duty," they said. "Too willing to sacrifice for others." They called it a dangerous pattern. Taeyang took the report and threw it in the recycler. "You're staying on my crew. They'll remove you if you don't comply. Let them try." But even as he said it, Taeyang knew he was powerless. The Soul's Pride was surrounded by Council monitors. Every transmission was watched. Every movement was logged. Humanity's flagship was a prison pretending to be a warship. At night, Taeyang stood at his viewport and looked at Earth below. The celebration lights were long gone. The protests had faded to sullen acceptance. His people had learned once again that in the galaxy of the Galactic Council, humanity would always be less, always be controlled, always be kept small and weak and grateful for whatever scraps the elder species chose to give them. He thought about Haijin's words before the council. "We have proven ourselves." But proof meant nothing to those who had already decided you were inferior. Cooperation meant nothing to those who saw you as a resource to be managed. Taeyang turned from the viewport and walked back to his desk. He pulled up classified files, reports that most humans never saw. Records of other species that had joined the council young and eager, only to be slowly absorbed into client states of the elder powers. Records of the Korathi, who had resisted and been annihilated for their defiance. The pattern was clear. The council did not want partners. They wanted servants? "Sir?" Dongwu's voice came through the cum. "New orders from Earth were to reduce crew by 30%. Council efficiency requirements." Taeyang closed his eyes. Acknowledged. Outside his window, Earth turned in the darkness, beautiful and helpless. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Council congratulated themselves on keeping another dangerous young species safely contained. 6 months had passed since the new restrictions came into force. Life continued across human colonies, but the joy had drained away. People worked, lived, and raised families under the watchful eyes of council monitors. They had learned to accept their place in the galactic order on New Jeju, a frontier agricultural world. Governor Mi-sun Beek walked through fields of golden grain that swayed in the alien wind. The planet had been humanity's success story, a world transformed from barren rock into fertile farmland through 15 years of backbreaking work. 200,000 people called this place home now. Children had been born here who had never seen Earth, this was their world. Mi-sun stopped at the community center where Hana-song was teaching a class of young children about Earth's history. The kids sat in a circle, their faces bright with curiosity as Hana showed them pictures of oceans and mountains from humanity's distant homeworld. Teacher Hana, one boy asked, will we ever see Earth? Hana smiled gently. Maybe someday. But New Jeju is your home. You're building something wonderful here. Mi-sun watched the scene and felt her heart swell with pride. This was what humanity could do when given the chance. This was proof that they deserved more than the Council's contempt. Her device buzzed. The message was from Council headquarters. She read it once, then some were relocated repeatedly until they fragmented. Others were absorbed as client states. One species, the Korathi, resisted. What happened to them? Someone asked. The Council annihilated their homeworld. They use it as an example of why the preservation protocols exist, to prevent dangerous young species from threatening the galactic order. The room fell silent. They all knew the story of the Korathi. It was used to justify every restriction, every limitation placed on humanity. But, continued, I found something else. During our 23 years in the Council, our researchers have had access to their technology and databases. We've been studying, learning, analyzing. And because we're human, because we think differently than species that have been comfortable for thousands of years, we've made breakthroughs they never considered. Dr. Sang-ho Wang, who had barely escaped New Jeju, stood next. His face was gaunt, haunted by what he had witnessed, but his voice was steady. We've developed a functioning quantum displacement drive, he said. According to Council physics, it shouldn't be possible, but we didn't follow their rules. We experimented, took risks, tried things they declared impossible. The result is a drive system that makes ships essentially untraceable. We can appear anywhere without warning and disappear just as quickly. Murmurs of shock and excitement filled the room. How many ships can be equipped? Tae-young asked. We have enough prototype drives for 30 vessels. Within 6 months, we could retrofit 100? Ambassador Yuna Choi spoke next. She had remained at the Council headquarters despite the danger, working quietly behind the scenes. I've been documenting everything, she said. Every violation of Council law by elder species. Every hypocrisy. Every crime they've covered up. The Vrexians have destroyed 4 other colonies using the same legal loopholes. The Luminals have conducted unauthorized experiments on client species populations. The Council leadership has been embezzling resources for private use. She held up a data crystal. This contains everything with full documentation and proof. If we broadcast this across all galactic networks simultaneously, it will shatter the Council's moral authority. Species that have suffered in silence will see they're not alone. Client states will question their loyalty. The Council's power is built on the belief that they're just and fair. This will destroy that belief. Tae-young listened to all of it, his mind working through possibilities and consequences. The room waited for his decision. We can't win a conventional war, he said finally. But we don't need to. The Council's strength is their unity, their moral authority, their control of information. We strike at all 3 simultaneously. He outlined the plan. Phase 1 would be Yuna's information attack, broadcast across every available channel to expose the Council's corruption, while they scrambled to contain the damage. Phase 2 would begin, precision strikes against specific Vrexian, military targets responsible for New Jeju, not an invasion, but a message. We're not trying to conquer them, Tae-young explained. We're proving they can be hurt. We're showing the galaxy that the Council isn't invincible. Governor Mi-sun Beek, who had lost everything on New Jeju, spoke up. And when they retaliate against Earth, we'll be ready. Every defense system we've developed in secret will be activated. We've had 23 years to study their technology while they underestimated us. Our defensive networks are better than they know. Tae-young had to make the final decision. Tae-young presented the plan in full, holding nothing back. The risks were enormous. If they failed, humanity would face the same fate as the Korathi. The president stood at his window. Looking out at Earth, he thought of Hannah Song and her children. He thought of 3,847 people who had died because the council saw them as disposable. He thought of the future, of whether humanity would continue to exist as a free species or slowly fade into servitude. "Do it," Tae-young said. But Tae-yang, understand this. We're not starting a war of conquest. This is about survival and justice. We strike hard enough to force them to negotiate as equals. Nothing more. Tae-yang saluted. Understood, Mr. President. Across human space, preparations began in absolute secrecy. Civilian ships were quietly retrofitted with military systems. Scientists worked around the clock to produce more quantum drives. Intelligence officers identified targets. Yuna prepared her data bomb, ensuring it would spread too fast and too wide for the Council to contain. In shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, engineers installed weapons systems that the Council had forbidden humanity to possess. Defensive satellites were reactivated around Earth and her colonies, their capabilities far beyond what Council inspectors had documented years ago. Fighter pilot Hyun-woo Nam, who had lost his entire family on New Jeju, volunteered to lead the first strike squadron. His hands didn't shake as he climbed into his fighter. They had shaken every day since he received news of his family's death. But now, with purpose and direction, he felt steady for the first time in months. For New Jeju, he whispered to himself. Lieutenant Dong-woo Lee coordinated the timing. Everything had to happen simultaneously across dozens of star systems. One mistake, one premature action, and the Council would see them coming. The night before the operation launched, Tae-yang stood alone in his quarters. He thought about the line they were about to cross. Once they started this, there was no going back. Humanity would be forever changed. His come chimed. It was a message from colonists across human space, thousands of signatures attached. It was simple. We trust you. Do what must be done. Tae-yang closed his eyes and thought of all the young species the Council had crushed. All the civilizations forced to abandon their dreams of equality. All the children who had died because elder species saw them as obstacles rather than people. No more, he said to the empty room. He opened a channel to all human fleet commanders. Execute Operation Reckoning. Make them hear us. Across dozens of star systems, human ships powered up their quantum drives. Yuna Choi activated her data bomb at Council headquarters. Defensive systems came online around Earth. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. President Dae-young addressed his people one final time before the storm began. We didn't want this, he said. We tried peace. We tried cooperation. We tried everything to prove we deserved to be treated with dignity. They answered us with death and contempt. Now we answer back. Not with conquest, but with the demand that we be treated as equals. The Council will negotiate with us, or they will learn just how dangerous desperate humans can be. In the Council chambers, the elder species went about their business, confident in their power and authority. They had no idea that in a few minutes, their 10,000-year-old order would begin to collapse. The Council chambers were in their usual state of calm bureaucracy when every screen, every communication panel, and every data network simultaneously erupted with the same transmission. Ambassador Yuna Choi's face appeared across the galaxy, her expression calm but her words devastating. Citizens of the galactic community, I am Ambassador Yuna Choi of humanity. What you are about to see is the truth your leaders have hidden from you. The data flood began. Thousands of documents, video recordings, intercepted communications, financial records. All carefully organized, all thoroughly documented, all impossible to dismiss as forgery. The Vrexians had destroyed 17 colonies, belonging to younger species over the past 2,000 years, always using the same legal manipulation. The Luminals had conducted genetic experiments on client species without consent, treating sentient beings like laboratory animals. The Council leadership had been embezzling resources meant for development aid, enriching themselves while younger species struggled, and there was more. Much more. evidence of the Council deliberately fostering conflicts between client species to keep them dependent. Records of promising young civilizations being sabotaged before they could challenge elder species dominance. Communications showing Council members laughing about the naive younger races who actually believed in the ideals of galactic cooperation. In the Council chambers, the High Councilors scrambled to shut down the transmission, but it was everywhere. Every public network, every diplomatic channel, every news feed across 300 worlds. Una had spent months preparing this, ensuring it would spread too fast and too wide to contain. On a trade station in neutral space, a delegation from the Corval species watched the revelations in stunned silence. They had been forcibly relocated 3 times in their history with the Council. Now they saw documented evidence that each relocation had been planned to seize their resource-rich worlds on dozens of client worlds. Populations that had suffered in silence saw proof that they weren't alone, that the Council's cruelty was systematic while the galaxy reeled from Yuna's information bomb. Admiral Taeyang's fleet moved into position. 30 ships equipped with quantum displacement drives, their crews trained and ready. They had one target, the Vrexian military installations responsible for New Jeju. The first strike hit the Vrexian Forward Command Base in Sector 7-1. Moment the base was secure behind its defensive shields. The next, 10 human warships materialized inside the shield perimeter. Weapons already firing, the attack lasted 4 minutes. The humans destroyed. Then they disappeared before reinforcements could arrive, leaving behind a single transmission broadcasting on all frequencies. For New Jeju, you taught us that might makes right. This is your lesson. Captain Dongwu Li commanded the second strike group. They hit a Vrexian supply depot that serviced the frontier fleets. The depot had been considered invulnerable, deep in Vrexian territory, protected by layers of security. The human ships appeared without warning. They didn't try to capture or occupy. They simply destroyed everything. Fuel reserves, ammunition stockpiles, repair facilities. The Vrexian frontier expansion, which had been preparing to seize 3 more young species worlds, ground to a halt overnight. Hyun Woo Nam led his fighter squadron against a target of pure, symbolic importance, the Vrexian monument to the New Jeju acquisition. It was a massive structure celebrating the Empire's successful resource claim. Built on the ruins of a human settlement, the fighters screamed out of quantum displacement, their weapons hot. The monument was reduced to rubble in seconds. Han Wu circled the debris once, thinking of his children who would never see him again, then led his squadron back into quantum space before the defense batteries could lock on across Vrexian space. 20 targets were hit in 6 hours. Not random attacks, but carefully chosen strikes against the infrastructure and symbols of the Empire's arrogance. Each attack was quick, precise, and impossible to predict. The Vrexian High Command raged and scrambled their fleets, but the human ships were ghosts. They appeared, struck, and vanished. Traditional tactics were useless. The Council convened an emergency session, declaring humanity a rogue civilization and authorizing military action. The elder species had faced rebellions before. They would crush this one like all the others. The Council's first wave aimed for Earth itself. If they destroyed humanity's homeworld, the rebellion would collapse. 20 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Ready to deliver an overwhelming show of force, what they found waiting for them was not the weak, outdated defense network the Council had catalogued. Years ago, Earth's orbital defenses came online in a cascade of power signatures that made the Council ship's sensors scream warnings. Defense satellites that were supposed to be decommissioned were not only active but enhanced with weapons technology the Council had never authorized. Defensive platforms that shouldn't exist materialized from stealth fields. The Council commander stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Where did they get all this? His sensor officer's voice was shaken. Sir, these aren't just upgraded systems. Some of this technology is completely unknown. They've been developing weapons in secret for years. The first volley from Earth's defenses crippled 4 Council ships. The humans weren't using the railguns and missiles the Council expected. They were using focused plasma arrays derived from luminal technology, but optimized with human tactical innovation. They were using gravitational pulse weapons that the Council's shields weren't designed to counter. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the Council fleet retreating, leaving 8 destroyed ships behind. For the first time in recorded history, the Council's military might have been beaten back. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Humanity, the weak young species that everyone dismissed, had just won a defensive battle against the Council's best forces on the trade station where the Corval had watched Yuna's broadcast. The delegation began quiet discussions about independence. On client worlds throughout Council space, resistance movements that had been suppressed for centuries suddenly found new courage. Captain Biorayun monitored communications across the galaxy, tracking the shifting political landscape. Admiral, we're seeing effects beyond what we predicted. 6 client species have declared independence. Trade routes are disrupted because species are refusing to honor Council authority. The Luminals are backing away from joint operations with the Vrexians. Taeyang studied the reports. The Council's unity was cracking. Their moral authority, damaged by Yuna's revelations, was crumbling further with each military setback. How long before they try Earth again? He asked. They're regrouping. But sir, their internal communications show confusion. The Luminals are questioning whether this fight is worth the cost. Several smaller Council members are calling for negotiations. The Vrexian Empire, however, was not ready to negotiate. Their pride demanded vengeance. They assembled a second fleet, larger and more powerful, and sent it to crush human resistance in the frontier. Colonies, but the colonies weren't there anymore. Taeyang had evacuated every human settlement, within reach of Vrexian forces weeks before the attacks began. When the Vrexian fleet arrived at target after target, they found empty cities, abandoned stations, and a single repeating message: we will not make it easy for you. The Vrexians were forced to chase an enemy that refused to stand still. Meanwhile, human strike teams continued hitting Vrexian infrastructure, appearing and disappearing like vengeful spirits. Governor Misun Beek, who had escaped New Jeju, now coordinated the evacuation efforts. She knew what it meant to lose a home. She would not let more humans die because the Council wanted to make examples of them on the diplomatic front. Yuna continued her campaign from a hidden location. She released new batches of evidence every few days, each one carefully targeted to increase pressure on specific Council members. She exposed the Vrexians' economic vulnerabilities, showed proof of the Luminal secret doubts about the current conflict, revealed communications showing that smaller Council members feared being the next targets if they sided with humanity. The Council's response became increasingly desperate. They declared all human transmissions to be propaganda. They tried to block access to the evidence. But once information was released to 300 worlds, it was impossible to contain. President Dae-Jung addressed the galaxy directly. His message broadcast through every network Yuna had access to. We didn't want this war. We tried for 23 years to be good members of your community. You answered us with restrictions, humiliation, and finally with the murder of our children. Now you call us rogues? Now you call us dangerous? You made us this way. You taught us that cooperation is weakness and that might is the only thing you respect. So here is our might. Here is our answer. We will negotiate with you as equals, or we will continue to show you that we cannot be conquered. The message resonated not just with humans but with dozens of other species watching humanity fight for the rights they themselves had been denied. Taeyang stood on the bridge of the soul's pride, watching tactical displays show the shifting balance of power. The Council was still stronger in absolute terms, but their unity was fracturing. The cost of crushing humanity was rising every day, and the political will to pay that cost was weakening. Sir, Dongwu reported, the Luminal Collective has issued a statement. They're calling for a ceasefire and negotiations. Taeyang felt something cautiously approaching hope. The Vrexians? Still refusing. But they're isolated now. 3 of their client species have declared independence in the last week. The Vrexian Empire was discovering what humanity had learned long ago. Power built on fear and exploitation is fragile. When that fear breaks, everything collapses. The galaxy watched and waited to see what would happen next. The council chambers that had stood for 10,000 years now felt like a tomb. Half the seats were empty as species withdrew their representatives. The elegant speeches and careful diplomacy had been replaced by desperate arguments and accusations. The elder species were watching their carefully constructed order collapse around them. The luminal collective made the first move toward peace. Their crystalline forms flickered with urgent light as their senior representative addressed what remained of the council. This conflict serves no one. The cost of defeating humanity would devastate half the galaxy. We propose immediate ceasefire and negotiations. The Vrexian High Counselor roared his opposition. We do not negotiate with terrorists. The humans must be made to submit. Submit to what? A small voice asked. It came from the Corval delegation, species that had never dared speak against the council before. Submit to a system that exploits us? We've seen the evidence. We know what you did to us, to the humans, to dozens of others. Why should any of us submit? The chamber erupted in voices, some supporting the Vrexians, others calling for change. The unity that had kept the council powerful for millennia was shattered. The Luminals contacted President Dae-Jung directly, offering to mediate negotiations. Dae-Jung consulted with Admiral Taeyang before responding. Can we trust them? The president asked. Taeyang considered carefully. They're pragmatists. They've calculated that we can't be defeated without unacceptable losses. But we need to be careful. This has to result in real change, not just a temporary peace that lets them rebuild and try again. The negotiations were held on a neutral station, one of the ancient commerce hubs that predated the council itself. Dr. Hyjin Park, who had once begged the council for recognition, now entered the conference room as an equal. She was accompanied by Admiral Taeyang Kim, whose across from them sat representatives from the Luminal Collective and a dozen other council species. The Vrexians had refused to attend, still clinging to their pride and power. Hyjin laid out humanity's terms. They were not requests anymore. They were requirements for peace. Complete removal of all restrictions on human sovereignty. Full council membership with voting rights. Reparations for New Jeju. Prosecution of Vrexian officials responsible for the colony's destruction. A complete restructuring of the preservation protocols to protect younger species rather than exploit them. Rights and protections for all developing civilizations throughout the galaxy. The luminal representative's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. These terms would fundamentally change the nature of the council. Yes, Hyjin said simply. They would. That's the point. The old council murdered children and called it legal. The old council treated younger species as resources to be managed. That council needs to die. The negotiations stretched for weeks. The Luminals were willing to accept most terms, but dozens of other species had their own demands and concerns. Some supported humanity completely. Others feared the chaos that would come from dismantling the established order. The Vrexian Empire remained defiant, refusing all compromise. Their ambassador sent a message. The Empire has existed for 40,000 years. We will not bow to upstart primates who have known space travel for less than 3 centuries. Admiral Taeyang's response was cold and calculated. Then watch as we dismantle your empire piece by piece. The campaign against the Vrexian Empire was not a military conquest. It was something far more devastating. Human ships appeared at Vrexian client worlds, but they didn't attack the populations. They broadcast messages to the Vrexian subjects, the dozens of species that the Empire had conquered and absorbed over millennia. You don't have to serve them anymore, the messages said. We're building something new. A galactic community based on equality and mutual respect. Join us, choose freedom. Colony after colony made that choice. The Vrexian Empire had ruled through fear and force, never earning genuine loyalty. When an alternative appeared, their subjects abandoned them in waves. Governor Misan Beek worked with representatives from newly freed species, helping them establish independent governments. Her experience losing New Jeju made her passionate about ensuring other species would never suffer similar fates. Kiwon Jang, representing one of the first Vrexian client species to declare independence, met with human diplomats to coordinate the transition. For generations we thought we had no choice but to serve them. Watching humanity fight back showed us we were wrong. You gave us courage. The Vrexian military tried to suppress the rebellions, but they were stretched too thin. Fighting humanity had depleted their resources. Fighting to hold their fragmenting empire at the same time was impossible. Within 3 months, the Vrexian Empire had lost 60% of its territory. The client species that had formed the foundation of their power were gone. Choosing freedom over servitude. President Daeyoung worked with Kiwon and other freed species leaders to draft the new accord, a replacement for the Council's hierarchical structure. It established genuine equality between species, regardless of age or power. It created accountability mechanisms so elder species couldn't abuse their position. It guaranteed protection for developing civilizations. The old council faced a choice: join the new accord as equals, or face isolation from the new galactic order being built around them. The Luminal Collective joined first, their practical nature recognizing the inevitable. They brought with them a dozen allied species. Others followed in a steady stream, each one adding their voice to the growing chorus for change. The Vrexians held out until their empire had been reduced to a fraction of its former size. Finally, facing complete collapse, they sent representatives to the negotiating table. The ambassador who had once sneered at humanity now sat in a room where his species had no more power than anyone else. The Empire agrees to the terms of the new accord, he said. The words clearly painful. Taiyang watched from the observation deck, feeling no triumph. Too much had been lost. New Jeju could never be restored. Hannah Song and her children would never come back. Victory didn't erase the cost, but it meant their deaths had not been meaningless. Dr. Haijin Park stood in the new assembly hall, built to replace the old council chambers. Instead of a hierarchical arrangement with elder species elevated above others, it was a circle. Every species had an equal seat. Every voice carried equal weight. She delivered the opening address, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. We stand here today because the old order failed. It failed to protect the weak. It failed to uphold justice. It failed to live up to its own ideals. The new accord is our commitment to do better. Not because we're perfect, but because we recognize that all sapient beings deserve dignity, freedom, and the chance to build their own futures. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives from hundreds of worlds. The galaxy tried to break humanity. They didn't understand that pressure doesn't break humans. It forges us. We didn't want to be conquerors. We wanted to be partners. But when you cross certain lines with humanity, when you take everything and demand we smile and thank you, that's when you discover what we're truly capable of. The assembly erupted in applause, not just from humans but from dozens of species who had suffered under the old system. Admiral Taeyang Kim stood in the observation gallery, finally allowing himself to relax. The war was over. Humanity had not just survived but had changed the galaxy forever. The restrictions were gone. The humiliation was avenged. More importantly, no other species would have to endure what humanity had endured. Captain Yuna Choi joined him at the railing. Hard to believe it's really over. It's not over, Taiyang said. Building something new is harder than tearing down something old. But at least now we're building as equals. Across the galaxy, life began to change. Trade routes reopened under fair regulations. Client species that had lived under oppression for centuries started rebuilding their cultures. Young civilizations that would have been suppressed under the old council now had mentors and partners rather than masters. A human colony ship, The New Dawn prepared to depart for New Jeju. The planet had been returned to humanity as part of the peace settlement. The Vrexian terraforming had been reversed, and the air was breathable again. Mi-sun Beek stood in the ship's command center looking at the memorial wall. It listed all 3,847 names of those who had died. Hana Song, her children, Dr. Sang-ho Wang's research team, families who had just wanted to build a better life. "We're going home," Mi-sun said to the empty corridor. "And this time, no one can take it from us." On the hull of the New Dawn, a plaque had been installed. It bore the names of the dead and a simple inscription. They died because the powerful thought them expendable. We changed the galaxy to ensure no one will ever be expendable again. In the new assembly hall, representatives from species that had once been enemies worked together to solve problems. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still cultural misunderstandings, still difficult negotiations, but they were equals in those struggles. Partners rather than masters and servants. President Dae-Young watched a live feed of the assembly in session and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The cost had been terrible. The risk had been enormous. But humanity had not just won its freedom. It had freed dozens of other species and created a foundation for genuine, galactic cooperation. A message came through from the observation post at the edge of human space. New species had been detected, just beginning to develop faster than light travel. In the old system, the Council would have been preparing to evaluate them for exploitation. In the new system, humanity and their allies were preparing to welcome them as partners. The cycle of oppression had been broken on a space station in what had once been contested territory. Children from multiple species played together in the observation dome. Human kids ran alongside luminal younglings, Corval children, and even young Vrexians whose empire had collapsed, but whose people had been welcomed into the new accord. They didn't know about the wars their parents had fought. They didn't understand the old hatreds and hierarchies. They just knew they were friends, growing up in a galaxy that valued cooperation over domination. A human teacher watched them play and smiled. This was what New Jeju had been meant to be, a place where different peoples could build something together. The colony had been destroyed, but the dream had survived and spread across the stars. Admiral Taeyang Kim retired from military service 6 months after the new accord was ratified. He had spent his career preparing for war, then fighting it, then building peace from its ashes. Now he was ready to rest. On his final day, he visited the memorial on Earth dedicated to New Jeju. He stood before the wall of names and saluted one last time. "We did it," he said quietly. "You didn't die for nothing. The galaxy is different now. Better, not perfect, but better." He turned and walked away, leaving the memorial behind but carrying its meaning with him always. Humanity had snapped. In breaking, they had shattered an unjust system and rebuilt something worth believing in.